Our next speaker has been an influential in strengthening the response of sexual assault forensic examiner states in American Samoa, where she has developed an interprofessional collaboration between physicians and nurses to solve problems and carry out plans for victims of sexual assault. She graduated with a Master in Medicine Obstetrics and Gynecology on December 6, 2006. She has been the Vice Chief of the OBGYN unit since June 2011. She is the chairperson of the Medical Staff Continuing Medical Education Committee, and by Laws Committee, she has been the project director and clinical provider for the American Samoa Family Planning Program since March 4, 2016. She is a member of the Pacific Society for Reproductive Health, PSIH, and an associate member of the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Obstetricians and Gynecology. She is happily married to Sautai Uliseseliaina of Lona Pangaloa and Bailoa, American Samoa. Dr. Yanisa will be speaking about teen pregnancies and ways that people around young mothers can support them in any way they can. Many of the ideas or stereotypes that revolve around this topic still seem to be controversial in our culture. Please help me introduce Dr. Yanisa.
Thank you, Leilani, for that beautiful introduction. Okay, so as Leilani has already mentioned, I am the project director for the American Samoa Family Planning Program. I would like to thank our Heavenly Father for making this virtual youth summit possible, and also thank our coordinating committee for this youth summit for the invitation to give a talk at this summit. Next slide, please. I have no financial disclosures in giving this talk. Next slide. Before I go on with my talk, I would first like to acknowledge our grantor, because every time we give a talk, when we are part of the family planning program, we have to acknowledge the grantor, which is the Office of Population Affairs. The Office of Population Affairs administers a Title 10 program, which is Public Law 91-572, and that law was signed into law by President Richard Nixon back in 1970. And the Office of Population Affairs administers this federal program, which is the only federal program that gives out the services regarding contraceptive services and preventive health services that people, mostly from low-income families and those who are not able to afford these services and those who do not have health insurance, are able to get these services through the Title 10 law. As I already mentioned, it's administered by the Office of Population Affairs, which is within the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, and it's under the Department of Health and Human Services. Recently received a grant, a 5-year grant, HPA 006539, and that grant started on April 1st, 2022, and will go on until March 31st, 2027. So that is Title 10. Next slide. So I was asked to talk about teen pregnancy. Next slide. Is teen pregnancy a problem? Well, in the United States, it is. And this is the scope of the problem in the United States. About 40% of females become pregnant before the age of 20. So that's 40% of females becoming pregnant during their teenage years. And half of these pregnant teens give birth each year, while around 45% of them have abortions. And 85% of teen pregnancies are not planned or unintended. And it costs US taxpayers about $9.5 to $11 billion annually. Next slide. What is the situation in American Samoa? Well, we don't have data on the finances that deal with teen pregnancy. But we have this graph that we keep the data on every year. This graph shows the total births at LBJ every year over the last 7 years. And then it also shows the number of teenagers that give birth at LBJ every year. What we try to do at the Family Planning Clinic is to keep the number of teenagers that give birth under 10% of the total births at LBJ every year. So if you look at this graph over the last 7 years, we've been seeing a decrease in the number of births at LBJ. In 2015, it was never a little over 1,100, but now last year, it's a little over 700. And it's the same thing with the number of teenagers giving birth at LBJ. You see, in 2015, it was a little over 100, but now the number of teens giving birth over the last 4 years has been in the high 60s and low 70s. So if you look at the line on the bottom, where it's percentage of teen births, we see that we've been successful from 2015 to 2020 in keeping that number of teenagers giving birth under 10%. But last year, it went back up to 10.2%. So we have our work cut out for us, but I think we can do it. So we'll look forward to the data from this year to see if we can get it back down to under 10%. Next slide. So what are we doing about it, about this problem with teen pregnancy in American Samoa? Well, for our family planning program, we have outreach programs to the schools, both elementary and high schools, to church youth groups, and also community groups. In going and doing these outreach programs, we try to give teenagers, youth, adolescents information to empower them to make informed decisions and to make better choices. We try to give them information to empower them to examine the consequences of their decisions before they make poor decisions. Next slide. So our outreach program is called Begins With Me, Teen Health and Teen Pregnancy Prevention Outreach Program. The Begins With Me concept was resulted from a collaboration between our family planning program and the reproductive health unit of the CDC and also the prenatal unit of the Department of Health at Tafuna Health Center. What was done was researchers from the CDC came to LBJ and did focus group discussions, held focus group discussions at LBJ and Tafuna Health Center. And there were 5 groups, 5 focus groups. 3 of them were female groups and 2 were male groups. And when they went back and transcribed these focus group discussions, this is the concept that they came up with, the Begins With Me concept. So from November in 2019 up till the end of the last grant that we had, the end of March 2022, we've been taking this outreach, this message out to the community, to the public schools, the public elementary schools. We've been to 21 of the 23 public elementary schools. The only elementary schools we haven't been to were the Ofu Elementary School and Aunuu Elementary School. And then we've been to all public high schools, including the high school in Nua. We've also been to youth groups and women's groups, church youth groups and women's groups in churches out in the eastern part of the island, the central part of the island, and also the western part of the island. And I'll touch some more on the Begins With Me concept in later slides. Next slide, please. So the following slides will be the slides from some of the slides that we use in our outreach. Like for teen health, we try to explain to the teenagers what teen health is. And so teenagers need to know that they belong to the age range of 10 to 19. And then there's another term that can be used interchangeably with teenager, and that term is adolescent. So they're told if they hear teenager or adolescent, it refers to them, that group in the 10 to 19-year age group. And then the definition of health that we use is the WHO definition, which states it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease or infirmity. People need to know, especially teenagers need to know, just because they're not sick doesn't mean they're healthy. You have to have a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being in order for you to be considered healthy. Next slide. What the other message that we try to take out to teenagers is that they need to know what they're going through right now during their teenage years. And what they're going through that right now is puberty. If they understand what they're going through, the changes they're going through in puberty, then they will be able to make the right informed decisions in their response to the things that come their way in their lives. So puberty is the process of physical changes through which a child's body matures and becomes an adult body capable of sexual reproduction. And that's what puberty is a child's body transitioning from a child into the body of an adult that is capable of sexual reproduction. And we teach the kids that all these happens starting from the pituitary gland, which is also called the master gland, secretes hormones that reaches target organs, in this case, the reproductive organs, testes in the males and ovaries in the females. And when those hormones reach those target organs, then those target organs release other hormones that cause changes that they're going through. So if they understand that, then they will know that puberty is normal. It's a part of normal growth, and it's a normal part of life. And if they understand that, then they can use the other information that we give them to help make choices, good choices instead of bad choices. Next slide. So what are the changes that they're taught about that occur during puberty? Well, they're already going through some of them, so they will recognize some of the changes. For females, they start off with pubarchy, which is the onset of hair. We all know that when we are teenagers, we start getting hair in our underarms, in our legs, in our private areas. You can also start getting pimples, acne, and start sweating. And then the bacteria in the underarms results in a body odor that some of us get during this time. And then there's thearchy, or the breast development. Then girls start to have, and their mothers have to start looking for bras to help them with their development. Then the last change that occurs during puberty in females is menarche, or the onset of menstruation. When this happens, that means that the ovaries, due to the hormone messages that it receives from pituitary, have now released the egg. And if the egg is not fertilized, then it just sheds out as menstruation at the end of every monthly cycle. But when this happens, then that means because the egg is now being released, if that teenager has sexual intercourse, then they're capable of getting pregnant, whether they're 10 years old or 14 years old or 18 years old. As long as that egg is getting released every month, and if you have sexual intercourse, you're able to get pregnant during your teenage years. So that's one thing to remember if they are teenage females here in our audience today, keep that in mind. Once you start having your periods, you're able to get pregnant if you start having sexual intercourse during your teen years. Next slide. Well, boys or males also go through changes during puberty. As we've seen with girls, boys can also have pimples or acne. They also have developed facial hair changes. Boys can even have breast growth, and that's normal part of health. And also mood swings. When I looked at these slides, I had to laugh because they put mood swings here with the boys when they should have put it with the females. But then we know boys can also have mood swings just like girls. So, and again, boys, keep in mind, once you go through these pubertal changes, you're capable of impregnating or getting someone pregnant because now your testes have received the message from the pituitary gland and is now producing testosterone and producing spermatozoa, and it's that sperm that fertilizes the egg after sexual intercourse and causes the girl to become pregnant. So that's the message that we try to take to the teenagers. Once they go through these changes, once these changes are complete during their teenage years, they're able to get pregnant if they have sexual intercourse during their teenage years. If it's something they want, fine. But as we saw with the other slide, 85% of females who get pregnant during their teenage years are not planned. They don't intend to get pregnant during that time. So it's something for them to think about during that time. Next slide. This other slide, last slide, is also included in our outreach. I'm not going to go through the slide. I just want to show it because that's one of the slides that we take out to the teenagers to help them. The apple in the middle is also in the shape of a heart. So think of it as your heart or an apple tree or a heart. And then all those branches that go out from the tree or the heart are what helps keep that heart functioning. Because without a healthy heart, we'll die. So research has shown a combination or a balance of these four things that I will mention in these branches will help you have a healthy life, and especially in teenagers or adolescents, a healthy adolescent life. If you look at the brown branch there on the left lower part of the slide, that is a nutritious diet. You need to eat a nutritious diet, not eat junk food. You see there, you don't see any junk food on there. And then the green branch on the left upper part of the slide is sleep. You have to sleep, get enough sleep during the night, 8 to 10 hours of sleep at night in order to be healthy. And then the blue branch on the right lower is regular exercise. You have to do that to get your heart pumping. And then last branch, the blue branch on the right upper, is you need to decrease your stress. So if you have a balance of a nutritious diet and getting adequate sleep, getting regular exercise, and no stress in your life, then you will have a healthy life. And that's why we use this slide in our outreach to the community. Next slide. So again, why we do the outreach to the teenagers, to the schools, the youth, church youth groups, is because education is power. One of my medical professors once told us that a little learning is a dangerous thing, and he's right. So by educating the teenagers, by informing them, giving them the right information on their health concerns, by giving them the right information on contraceptives if they want it, then we're empowering them to make the right decisions for their lives. Another part of our outreach is birth control method, which is abstinence. We all know abstinence is not having sex, but this is the 100% way to prevent a pregnancy. And that's what we tell the kids. If you don't want to get pregnant, then don't have sex. But if you cannot abstain from having sex, then you start and use a birth control method, because preventing an unintended pregnancy is very important for self-fulfillment and for self-responsibility. Next slide. So this is my last slide. Again, begin the concept. I've already informed you about how we came up with that concept. But what these men and women in the focus groups were really saying in those focus groups was, if you want to prevent an unintended pregnancy, then you have to put your health first. And if you put your health first, you have to learn about the health benefits of birth control as a measure of your overall health. If you want to prevent an unintended pregnancy, you have to plan and space your pregnancies. And because if you plan and space your pregnancies, you're actively preparing for a healthier future, because a healthy future begins with me, begins with you, as our representative said earlier in the summit. So that's from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Yanitza, for providing such great information. Uh, Great points about early family planning. It's such a huge thing overlooked when doctors tell families to prepare, but it's something that we should all take in consideration for anyone in any situation. Now being able to understand that we can give support and where we can find support, I hope that we can share that with the rest of our community who aren't able to make it to today's session. But does anyone have any questions for Dr. Yanitzo? Let me see the chat box. What is the process for teens to have access to birth control?
The process?
Yes.
There
One of
no,
the questions.
yeah. So what we've been trying to do with our outreach is also increase awareness about access to birth control methods. We're the only place where you can get birth control methods in American Samoa. So the family planning clinic is located at LBJ, and we're in the door to the clinic faces the back parking lot. So right now, since the pandemic, we've been going through an appointment system. So you can call the hospital, have them put you through to the family planning clinic, and you can make an appointment with our administrative assistant to come in for a method. We have after hours for those who are in school. And we might try and restart our Saturday clinic because we stopped that all when the pandemic started. But that's the only place where you can get contraceptive methods, is the family planning clinic. And everything is confidential there. You do have to sign a consent, but everything is kept confidentially. No one will know that you were there.
So another question in the chat box, it says, in regards to the hormones, and most people call it the bees and the birds, do you think puberty is such a non-existent conversation with parents and children?
Yeah, we still, when we go out to the women's groups, there's still women who have that problem, talking to their kids about sex education, because you all know it's against the law in American Samoa to teach sex education in the schools. And even to this date, I mean, we had that when we were teenagers. And even now, you think we'd learn and we'd be able to talk to our own kids about the birds and the bees and all that. But that problem is still there. But if it makes it easy for people, you can come by the clinic if privacy is what's needed, or if the parents want us to give some data to their kids, then certainly can be done.
Mm. Okay. Another question in the chat box. So it goes back to one of your answers earlier. Do you have to get a parent's consent if you're under 18?
The family planning is the only program where a teenager can sign their own consent form. And once they sign that, we are not, we're bound by law not to inform even the parents. So contraceptive methods is the only place where a teenager, a child can sign a consent and will honor that consent and not inform their parents or anyone else. All your medical records will be confidential.
I see, I see. So
But it's always good for parents to bring in their children, because
yes,
that's another thing with our program, family participation. So that it shows us that the parents, as well as the other siblings, have a say in what the teenager is going through.
yes. Another question, it says, do you think teens' birth will increase or decrease because of this pandemic?
Well, the years of the pandemic, 2020 and 2021, it's in the low 70s. So
Mhm.
um, I don't know. We'll have to see. But my guess is going to be low, and it's because our birth rate is going has been declining. So I think if we can keep it there in the high 60s and low 70s,
Yeah,
then we'll be okay. Because the kids are staying home too. They're not going out during the pandemic, so they're not mingling around out in the communities. They're staying home, so maybe it's not going to go up. That's my guess.
okay. So let's see. One final question for you, Doctor. And how have you and your team have been able to have these kinds of conversations, especially with these families that are very conservative? So, like, in what ways
Right.
possible?
How we've been taking the message out. We've been
Yes.
fortunate. We've been fortunate. Um, when we go out to the church youth groups, it's not just the teenagers that are there. It's also the parents. Also, the parents are there and the members of the clergy. And we found out when we've been going out since November 2019 that they're very supportive and they want their kids to say something. You know, when we have our parents there, we're not going to say anything. We're going to have them do all the talking. But that's our experience over the last 2 years, taking this message out. When the parents are there, members of the clergy who are very conservative are there, they're telling the teenagers, the kids, to speak up because they want to hear what their kids want to say. And so that's the opportunity for the kids to speak up, because that's the only time they'll get to speak up. And that's a better time
Right.
to speak up when there's a lot of people around, so they get okay and get um yeah,
Mm.
that it's better to take it out to the church youth groups. And even with the schools, with the administration, the DOE administration was also very supportive of us and was able to allow us to go into the schools, going through the health classes. Instead of going teaching about sex education, we're teaching them about their health. So that's how we were able to go to the schools.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry, there is one more question in the chat. So it says, what type of support that is mostly needed by young girls who are becoming pregnant?
The type of the support they need
Yes.
is mainly from their family.
Mm.
I know during our time there was not that much family support, but these days, now that my generation, their kids are having kids themselves, they're very supportive. And yeah, that's what I've noticed working at the OBGYN unit. The girls the teenagers that come in pregnant have good support from their families, and
Mm.
that's good for them.
Thank you. Dr. Yanitza, it seems like you and Georgia have a lot of love in the comment box.
Oh, thank
If
you.
you if you do, please feel free to type them in the chat box. And if you have any questions for our guest speakers, please feel free to keep asking those questions throughout the youth summit. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Yanitzo.